So, okay, hi everyone. I'm Charlene, former product manager at Google and currently the founder of Distillable. I'm really excited to have Daniel Scofield and her awesome uh, founder friend Hanna McPhee join us today. So they both have a ton of experiences. Hanna is currently the co-founder and CEO of Nanu, a wellness startup in the hardware space. They're focused on reshaping people's relationship with time and routine through tactile and sensory focused products. Before that, Hanna was the first employee at Fellow, which designs modern coffee gear for the home. So a lot of home space learnings that we can hear more about today. And that Danielle Schofield has a long history in innovation. She started her career at Bell Labs and founded a few startups, co-founded early stage venture capital firm that invest across biotech, nanotech, medical devices, manufacturing, and more. She's been advising startups for over 2 decades. That is super friendly, creative, and also very direct at telling founders the important things investors generally don't want to share or don't tell. So this is a really good opportunity to ask her some of those questions. And she's also the co-creator of a best-selling book called Business Model Generation and has a ton of unique business insights from building startups. So if any one of you have any questions throughout the call, feel free to message me and I will ask Hanna and them along the way. So Deb, do you want to start by sharing? There's a lot we can start with, but one thing that really stood out was the OBGYN story and how the investor, like the one you shared online, and how the investor conviction has shifted over time.
Yeah, so in my VC firm, one of the things we invested in was biotech devices. And we were really excited about this device that could measure, it would measure the cervix, and depending on the thickness, that was a very 95+% indicator of preterm or full-term birth. So, I mean, that's a huge thing to be able to predict that. They had gotten the FDA clearance. They had gotten the approval of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology's use of practice or whatever for practice thing, so that they had said, yes, this is important. All you docs should be using it. They and we, the VCs, also helped them arrange to have some big names in the industry using it. And it never really went anywhere because one of the biggest inhibitors in any startup or product, and Hanna can talk to this pretty darn well too, is behavior. I mean, this was a new device. Yeah. It was not, I mean, it didn't cut, it didn't need sutures, it didn't need anything. But it was a new way of measuring to prevent preterm birth. And, you know, a lot of OBs were like, well, I've been doing this forever. I don't think there's a problem. And it just never got accepted. It never got enough users, enough docs to use it. And so it basically died. You know, I joked, but it wasn't really a joke, about if you could find out or get a list of every woman visiting an OBGYN's office, we could send them the device or have them buy the device. But again, the biggest obstacle there was nothing technical, nothing with the IP, nothing regulatory. It was getting physicians to change behavior, which is notoriously hard to do.
And Hanna, I'm sure you have been through a couple of those transitions throughout your journey. Can you share more about what you're working on and how has that idea shaped over the years?
Yeah, so the startup that I founded, Nanu, we're very focused on time and people's relationship with time. So that's a pretty nebulous idea. And there's a lot of work that goes on for marketing of helping teach our consumers why they might want to use our product. But riffing off of Deb's point of behavioral changes, some of our products are new behaviors and some of our products are tweaks of existing behavior. So example is We're building an alarm clock that gets your cell phone out of the bedroom. You're already waking up every morning. 80% of folks use an alarm clock in some way, and a huge portion of those use a smartphone. So we're trying to just switch you from a smartphone to our alarm clock, because there's a lot of science behind why cell phones are bad for sleep. But so that's like one, that is a change in behavior, but it is not a new behavior. And then we also have a mechanical counter that is for breaking routines. So the original use case was for counting days sober. That is more of a new behavior. And so to Deb's point, I think you have to go in eyes wide open on who is your target audience, who is like the very specific target audience. So like in that case, I'd say there's probably like niche groups of OBGYNs that you want to go after. And then on top of that, understanding just the different layers of the products or features that you're offering, and how new is it versus, like a behavior that they understand. But yeah, and I can speak to more of like how we have taught our consumers about products that are new behaviors, but I'll
One of the questions we got from the attendee is how to zoom in and effectively nail your initial market. And Deb, you may have seen that from many different cases. Hanna, you have done it yourself. We'd love to hear more about both of your perspectives on this.
So I'm a big believer in a narrow initial target market, which is the question. But you'll see people, well, I think this could go to here. And someday you may. I think when you're looking to nail your initial target market, one of the best ways to do that, and I know this is trite and it's a cliche, but fall in love with the problem, not the solution, and understand for the problem you have discovered, hopefully not created, who really suffers that problem, if you will, the most. Who are those who are most affected by this problem? And also then have the highest motivation, back a little to behavior, the highest motivation to want to do something about it. And do something about it enough to change behavior and maybe like shell out some dollars, pay for it. And I would then, as you start narrowing in on who are those niches, go for the niche that, again, is the most willing to try a change because the pain is that bad. And as I said, to pay for it and use it and adopt it regularly. And the reason I say regularly is, especially if you were talking a bit only solution, I look at the world as bits, atoms, and combos. So Hanna is wonderfully in the atom world. But if you're thinking an app, we download apps all the time and they're sitting on the phone. We never use them. We use them once or twice. That's it. So who would be regularly using that? And then target them and get them to start using it as an initial market, to prototype, to beta test, to understand what is motivating them to actually do something about whatever that pain is, so that you could then take those learnings and apply it to maybe another broader market who are not quite as motivated, but now you're learning how to motivate. Does that make sense?
I would say that I fall into it is easy to fall in love with the solution and not the problem over and over again. I've designed and launched 25 consumer goods or consumer products. Most of them are consumer electronics. And I feel like that happens every time in the process. It's just one of those things that you're like, I think especially as entrepreneurs, you get so excited about the solution that you don't focus as much on the problem as you should. And it's kind of the nature of an entrepreneur to be very excited and to just go for it. And that's the beauty of an advisor like Deb, is having somebody say like, wait, have you fully thought through this problem, fully thought through the different niches that you might be wanting to hit? Yeah, and then I would just want to echo the more niche, the better. I personally, and have been advised by Deb and other advisors, I don't know if there is too niche of an audience to go after. It sounds absurd because everybody's always asking like, what's your total addressable market? Questions like that. I think a lot of those questions are red herrings, but and I can explain that. But yeah, I don't think there is too niche of an audience to go after.
Yesterday, I was just doing a workshop on value proposition with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and we were doing the customer profile piece. So just the customer, not their stuff. And so we were going over jobs, pains, and gains. And I said, now think of the gains as what they really would love to have if they could have the perfect solution. It's not you, it's not your product. Put you aside. And I'm going around the room and looking, and one of the entrepreneurs, one of the startups, had under gains the name of their product. And I was like, guys, it's not you yet, maybe ever. But that is so hard to step back and understand what do they really want without imposing your worldview and your product or service on it.
And Hunter had a question, which is related to both Hannah, what you have been doing, and then what you have told a lot of founder, which is how do you know when it's time to pivot your target audience, right? Like you pick a niche, you go really deep. Like how do you know what are the signals to look for? When is it a time? And when should you dig deeper into the existing needs?
Hannah, want to take a
Yeah,
go?
I'll go for it. I think about this for choosing when you're in idea generation, when to go for that idea, and then also when you're thinking about your niche audiences. I learned this term actually. I've always been doing this, but I learned this term last week of triangulation of basically, can you find multiple sources that are going to validate this idea, the idea or the niche audience? So I'll give you like a really specific example. For our mechanical counter, knitters found us. That is not a niche audience that we were going after. We're in the wellness space. Knitting is more of the hobby space. So I really ignored that niche audience for a while because I was like, I don't think these are our people. I don't know how much they're going to like overlap in our next products as we build our portfolio, all these things. Finally, I started testing the audience to see like, is this a niche audience worth going after? And to do that, I wanted a couple of different sources. I wanted to triangulate. So I ran ads to see, like, are people clicking on this? Are people buying? I did user research in terms of talking to actual knitters. And then I talked to buyers of knitting companies because all three of those data sources, you're talking to them differently, you're selling to them differently, and they also have different perspectives and different motivations for why they would buy it. So I think the like short answer is triangulation, just trying to find different sources of information that have wildly different, potentially perspectives, behaviors, shopping and buying experiences to figure out if that niche or idea is valid.
Spot on. I mean, that's exactly true. And that gets to also the point of when you're looking at your initial target audience, and again, I'm saying initial because it's not who you have to stick with, and you will pivot. I have a little side though, I will say, if you're pivoting the whole product company concept more than about 3 times, I think there's some underlying issues you might want to look at in terms of who and how you're running the place. But if once you start getting a feeling of, and this is by getting prototypes and stuff out there, oh yeah, that's okay. Well, that might work. You don't see it really clicking. They're not giving you really good detailed feedback on the prototype you're showing them. Those are some signs that this might not be the market for you to go to, at least initially. You might want to do a little bit of further digging if you feel that there's potential there, and if not, just move on. This is an art, this is not a science. There's like not a postcard that's going to come down and say, yo, Paul, time to go talk to this people. That doesn't happen. It'd be great. But you will start getting a sense, and I'm just telling you will, because I've seen it over and over. When you don't see that excitement, when they don't feel a compelling need. And that's why you've got to step back and really understand the problem from the user's perspective and not again, you're superimposing, which we do as humans, because their issue may change depending on day of week, time of day, weather, wherever they are, anything. It might not be constant.
One thing you talked about is a client who put branding under their assets. Like they put their logo and their name as one of the assets they have. So one question we got from the audience is, how do you strengthen the brand reputation from the ground up without a big marketing budget? And we talk a lot about pivots here, right? Which means basically rebranding. So we'd love to hear more about, from the startup lens, how does that actually look like?
So I think, I mean, we can talk about going viral, yada, yada, yada. I think you have to really think through your brand and not just the design. I mean, the artistic graphical representation is critical. And there's all the science you can go to instead of what colors, blues versus greens, whatever. I would advise you to think of that carefully with what markets you're going after. So part of my background is in cognitive science and research and stuff like that. And colors and fonts and all that have different interpretations in different parts of the world. Same color can mean something different as can to different generations. But your brand is going to be based on your values. And not enough startups do this right at the beginning, which is look at what are our core values. And it's not just a nice exercise, it's a critical exercise. What will and won't we stand for? And translate that into what behaviors will we abide and what behaviors we will not tolerate. And all that goes into creating the culture and the ethos around your brand, which you have to consistently live out. And then find the avenues for doing that, partnering with something that lives to your values. Like I think of Subaru. Okay, I love Subaru, right? But what they did is they really looked at what are the values of our buyers, education, healthcare, some other things. And so they contribute to those. They're very outdoorsy. So they have packages for your outback that are for skis or for dogs or for cross country or whatever. So continually living your brand and building your values and reinforcing it in that, I think is really an important way to do that. And you start with the community, your target audience, and use other folks to help spread the word so it's not always you. But Hanna can talk to this from both the fellow and the nanu perspective very well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think of brands as like identities, like living, breathing things, rather than a logo and colors, and maybe some like writing guidelines, because it's constantly changing. Just like your product market fit should be focused and flaring a bunch over the lifetime of a company, so does your branding. And so it's just really limiting to think of branding as only graphic design. It should be this like living, breathing thing. Values are super important. To Deb's point, I think who you partner with, like all of the decisions of how do your business ticks might seem like they might not connect to brand values, but I guarantee you almost all of them do in some way, shape, or form. And it actually makes decision making a lot faster and easier on a leadership team if you understand your brand values. I have a lot of my tech startup friends who come to me asking if I can help them build them a sexy brand, because consumer goods, like we have to, I'm in premium consumer goods. So we always make like really sexy brand experiences. And immediately they're like, can you design me a logo and colors and like the homepage of a website? And then I always send them a Google Doc it's about like 3 pages, and it's a series of questions about like your identity as a brand. What are your values? How do you show up in the world? How do you speak? Things like that. And they get really frustrated with me because that's the harder way to do it and takes more time. And you can't just hire a graphic designer to do your branding, but it will save you so much time and money in the future. Believe me, Fellow did a branding refresh that costs a lot of money because leadership was not on the same page about our brand values. And then actually, sorry, one more thing. Deb mentioned community. I think that also like how you show up in the world with your brand values is what attracts your community. And your community is what builds you a healthy business. It builds you a good repeat customer rate. It builds you advocates that are gonna give you shout outs when TikTok trolls coming for you, because they will. And having those advocates on your side is really helpful. It helps with word of mouth. Your community, in my opinion, is the health of your business in terms of metrics for average order value, repeat purchase rate, all of those things.
To that point, when I was a kid in Bell Labs, even though it's a think tank, there were still some marketing-ish people there. My boss always said to me, have your slides. Yes, they were physical slides then, guys, in your back pocket. That's always explaining what your research is on and why someone should just be tickled to death to hear about it and maybe get you some funding. And the analogy he used is, you're at a party and someone says, well, what do you do? What are you working on? And you tell them, you want to be able to explain your brand in such a way that they say, oh, I'm going to go get a drink. Want to come with me? Instead of, oh, that's nice. I'm going to go get a drink. So think of it, how do you keep that going?
And both of you have talked a lot about pitching, seeing what resonates with the market side. But you also both have a lot of experience with the investor side. Can you speak to that, like how you engage investors along the way? What's the role they play to your company, either beneficial or detrimental? Like any learnings here for the founders?
So as we talk value proposition and understanding what it is your users want, use that same model and methodology for your investors. So you're going to come pitch to me, say, well, what are the jobs I want to do? Well, obviously, I want to invest in something and make boatloads of money, but there might be other things. What are the pains I have making that happen? What would be the gains if I succeeded? So look at your investor or investors as customers and do that same kind of due diligence. Also, guys, bear in mind, you have a right to say no, and look at investors that will match your priorities and your values. And then, short and sweet, what I always wanted to know was, what is the problem? For whom, when, why, where, why, how, all that stuff. Why you, and why you now? And also, and this is my latest bugaboo, tell me about the competition. Don't give me one of those, 2x2 matrices and you're always in the upper right, or the table and you're always, seriously, we know you're going to be better than, anything on the face of the earth. Drive the conversation from the key, immutable, fabulous, wonderful benefits you're providing that meet the specific needs of the user. That's what I want to hear. And I also want to know, because I'm investing in people even more than ideas, I'll take an A team with a B idea instead of a B team with an A idea. Why you now? Why are you guys so poised to be the bee's knees to solve this wicked problem?
Just jump. Okay.
And I was just going to say, and don't feel you always have to cater to us. You can push back too.
I think just jumping off of that, my fundraising experience is very niche because I'm in hardware. So Fellow has now raised institutional money, but for my company, we're only raising from angel investors. So I approach investors the same way I approach customers, and that I'm looking for like a very specific type of investor. And I would urge you to too, if you're going to fundraise, because you're going to waste a lot of time with people that don't care about what you're doing, and that's going to sting, A, and B, it's just a waste of everybody's time. And that actually goes back to our core values. So like one of Nanu's brand values is longevity. So We care very much about making consumer electronics that have a warranty of a minimum of 10 years and will last generations. That's very, very rare in consumer electronics. The average lifespan is 4 years. So we need investors who care about that and are not put off by that, because a lot of VCs actually are worried about that, of how are you going to get your next customer if you're, if you're not going to sell them another iPhone. So I think it's going after niche audiences for your investors and really understanding your brand values and if they align with those investors. And sometimes that's hard to figure out until you've had a conversation with them. But I would say that too, of like, the pickier you are, the more time efficient you're going to be. And it sounds counterintuitive, but I just went through wasting a lot of my own time making that mistake. So yeah.
You also raise a bit of cachet that way.
Yeah.
Oh, they said no. Ooh. That's like, oh, maybe I should be interested because they said no to them. The other thing I just say this all the time, is if you're looking at raising money and you think in about 6 months you're going to go raise money again, it's so much time, as Hanna said. Do both of those at once. Don't try to think, oh, we're only going to raise $500,000 now. If you're going to need $1.5 million, go for it. Maybe you have longer in terms of the time you're raising a bit, but it just takes so much of your time. You don't want to do it, get it done, and now you're back at it again, because it's time away from working on your stuff.
One thing you both touched upon a lot is things you wish you know earlier in the startup journey. And one thing that I know that talked a lot about is like common reasons why startups fail. Not finding product market fit, not pivoting earlier. Can you both talk a little bit more about that? Like, what are some of the lessons you wish you know earlier or have seen from other founder friends that maybe people here can know and avoid that?
That's good. Well, I think one of them is understanding how much time fundraising takes. I have made this mistake multiple times. It just takes so much time, and it's also really emotionally draining. Even when you have a positive pitch and it goes really well, you're like so amped afterwards that you just can't necessarily focus on deep work like CADing or something, or coding, I suppose. I know there's more tech people in here. I would say that, and there are always alternative ways to finance your startup. I think that's a big learning in the hardware world, but I think it can be applied, especially in this current market for tech. Fundraising is really challenging right now. Obviously, there's still money to be had, but I think that a lot of folks, especially in San Francisco, are kind of just in this world where it's like, oh, you make a startup and then you go find a VC and then you start it and then da 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 da. And there's just so many other ways to do it. Like we're part of our financial plan is debt financing, for example, but there's like 8 other ways you could do it. And so I think that finding the right people to talk about your financing strategy over the next couple of years is one thing I wish I had done earlier on.
I have 2. One's a little more tactical, one's more strategic. Look at where you are starting your company. So, for example, I'm in Maine. And Maine has, through the federal government, but also the state, developed these amazing financial programs for what they call heritage industries. So that includes paper, pulp, anything to do with trees before, during, and after they're a tree, with the whole aquaculture, lobstering, shellfish, kelp, all that stuff. So for instance, one of the startups I mentored and I'm now on the board of makes a molded fiber that replaces plastic, and it totally disintegrates. It's compostable, not degradable. It doesn't go into little bits. It goes into the earth and just becomes earth. And because it is pulp from the state of Maine and it's a wood-based product, the amount of grants, low interest financing that's available from the state. There is also a deal, I'm not going to get all the terms right, but if you are an investor in Maine that invests in this company, if you put $1 in, 40% of that is given by the government. You basically, if you're putting in $1, you're really putting in 60 cents, because you get a 40% tax break for having put that in. So take a look at the different states and see what they have. The more strategic, higher level is, and it's true for startups, it's true at any level of a company. Very few leaders have what I call humble confidence. So investors want you to be, as Hanna said, very confident, gung-ho, all that. But you can really easily slip over to being an arrogant, you-know-what. And you need to have confidence, but be humble enough to admit you're wrong, and you need to learn. Because I submit the reason most companies don't find product market fit is because they really didn't want to know it was different than what they wanted to offer. Your preconceived notions on the problem and on the solution, you don't really step back and have it be about the customer. It's really somewhat about you. So being confident but humble that you have a lot to learn about what are the real needs, what's the supply chain, how do you manage your people, even when everyone around you might be saying, oh my gosh, you're the greatest, in the world. Humble confidence in leadership is so critical for success.
And that actually is directly related to great founders searching for truth instead of confirming their biases, right? It's because there is a lot that the market is going to show you otherwise. Things will be changing, and I'm sure both of you have seen a lot of that. So before I ask the next question, I do want to open up in case anyone's in the group wants to ask Deb, Hanna directly, either questions that you're thinking right now around product market fit or just building startups at large.
Maybe I have a question. Thanks, Hanna and Deb. Great to meet you. You mentioned at the very top of the call that the biggest inhibitor for any type of adoption is behavior. And in order to move behavior, I feel like there might be one or two things, maybe three things that would kind of like encourage that would be like around motivations and then incentives. And then also perhaps maybe there's like the fear of change or the fear of like change management. So making their lives harder. I'm wondering, how deep do you go into those levels of understanding the target audience and providing that gap to get them to trial the product initially? And then at what point do you kind of make a judgment call and saying, this is something that we'll continue to provide as we continue to roll out our product, right? So you talk about the OBGYN segment. You said that there's a clear need, there's an issue that you're trying to solve for. Maybe their incentive is like, I don't really, this probably is not going to generate me more money, but it might save me more time. So if that's the case, and you say, well, let me bring on some account managers or whatever it is to kind of service this business for you, right? That becomes a cost that you incur as an organization, but you know that that's going to accelerate the adoption of whatever this hardware would look like. It makes sense in this initial scenario, but then how do you think about driving that beyond the first adopters?
That's a great question, because you may need to do some of that to get over the barriers of lack of motivation or fear of change or whatever. But you don't want to be dependent on that forever. And I think as you start expanding the base, first of all, as you start expanding, if you've been serving that niche, you can start showing an ROI, be it a return on the financial investment or time or like, less malpractice suits, whatever it may be, that then lets you decrease the amount of service and handholding you need to do. I would say if you need to do some of that service handholding, you should look at, are there any ways to recoup those costs? Can you charge something for them? So I think looking at it that way, one of the clearest ways I've seen is to present some kind of ROI where the return on investment is applied to whatever they're doing. So like malpractice or time or money or frustration, all the people that you can hire to put your IKEA stuff together because it's so frustrating. They went after a market of frustrated people that were losing screws all over the place. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I would look at using those initially if you have to, and maybe you only do it with your initial target and you don't after that. But you want some stickiness there for them to come back to you and keep using your product if it's a product that's reusable in that way. You know, in the case of the OBGYNs, they might, you know, I don't know how long the product was going to last, but they wouldn't be needing tons of them. So it wasn't a recurrent purchase from the same physician's practice, which gets to the point of a product does not a company make. So this was their first product. We wanted to see a little bit of a roadmap because, I mean, at some point you'll max out how many of those you can sell enough to gain market share. What's next? Hanna.
I think Fellow had this was a big problem for Fellow as we went into growth stage. So Fellow is 10 years old now. They're, I believe, over 100 million in annual revenue. So now they are past the very core specialty coffee niche, like coffee nerds, and more into what we used to call coffee curious. So people who are like, I'd like to try specialty coffee and switch away from Dunkin', but I'm not sure. What we looked for was just bridges of like, how are you going to cross the chasm and go from your early adopters to this like next tier out? Sometimes your niche audiences can be your actual bridge to your broader audience. So they can be your word of mouth, they can be your advocate. So for us, it was our first niche audience was specialty coffee nerds that are on like Reddit chirping about different grinders and burgers and things like that. We realized that their word of mouth on the internet is great, but also the word of mouth of actual professional baristas was how you get to the coffee curious people. So took that niche audience, tried to get our kettle in every possible specialty coffee store in the country, both them using it and selling it to help us spread the word and gain trust with that like next broader audience. Another bridge that we use is product, like the next product, to Deb's point about product portfolio. So Fellow always did really expensive, really technical pour over coffee equipment. So like $400 grinder, $160 kettle for pour over. We came out with a double wall vacuum insulated tumbler that's only like $39, $29, depending on what price you get. This is like a much more approachable product. It's designed for the coffee nerd, like the way the lip disperses the coffee on your palate so you can taste your specialty coffee better. All of those things are still appealing to our core audience, but this is a way more approachable price point and just like general behavior to adopt for a broader audience. So that product was a bridge for us to get to a broader market. So there's like a couple different, I guess bridges is the general theme.
Any other questions for?
I had a question. Let me turn on my video. Hello, everybody. I'm Emily. Just a quick question around the mismatch between short-term growth and long-term value. Something I'm building, I think investors and even the paying companies, hopefully, the value that would come to them would be longer term than that shorter term. Would you suggest, how you prove that ROI, or would there be iterative products as you're building this and kind of proving out what I'd be building?
There is a fabulous book by Chip and Dan Heath called Switch. And I think it's got a blue cover with a light switch on it. And it talks about the path, the rider, the elephant. So, or the rider, the elephant, the path. And the path is that, like, think of it, Emily, as your longer term, here's short term, but this is where you want to go. The rider can see that. The elephant just sees what's in front. So think of the rider and the elephant as like parts of our brain. And I'm not going to get into all that, stuff. But in order to keep the elephant going, you need short-term wins or short-term things that help you see you're actually getting there, that it's not impossible and all that. And so I think you talked about like iterative products along the way. I don't know, depending on what you're building, could there be ways to encourage helping them see that roadmap and kind of follow themselves, like even maybe having a map and showing where you are along the map. Look, you're getting further, you're getting further. I think those are important ways to keep the motivation and the understanding and keep reinforcing that return on time in terms of return on investment. The other thing I'll say, and I know I was a VC, but if you can stay away from us, it's wonderful.
Yes.
I would never have wanted, and I did the due diligence process for our firm, and I would never have wanted to pitch to myself. A lot of VCs, because they want their money back, are going to push you to grow faster than maybe you want, but a lot of times faster than you should.
Yes.
And you don't have to. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, we're in a position where you can't, like hardware, you can't usually 10x in 1 year. It's not possible without hitting some massive quality control issues, and just also we're working in atoms. And I sometimes am really frustrated by that, because it's like, man, this would make fundraising maybe a lot easier. But I think it is a blessing in disguise, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes, grow that fast.
Anyone has, yeah, Paul?
Yeah, Deb, you said something, I think I might have misheard it earlier, but you had a classification of like bits, atoms, and combos.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, can you explain that a little bit more and expand on that?
So, I mean, it comes from, so I teach and mentor at Brown, and I teach with engineering kids and computer science kids. And I think most people default to, in thinking startups, oh, it's an app. And to me, an app it's bits, ones and twos. And Hanna's in the atom world, which I'm partial to. We are still made of atoms. Most of us are not made of bits yet. And there are combinations, though, of, like, actually, this is atoms and bits, right? And so I think it's important to think from, especially when we do UI, UX, everyone thinks bits. Nobody really thinks atoms. Having had little kids, furniture with sharp corners, things like that, atom-based things can be dangerous. So I think of the UX around bits. There's also, think of Amazon. They sell you things in atoms, like you might buy books there, gadgets, whatever, right? But your interaction is all online. It's all bit-based. So as you think about how are you going to distribute, what are your channels to the market for what you're going to make? Are you in store all the time with brick and mortar? Are you online? Are you online delivering online stuff? Are you, online bits delivering bits? Are you online bits delivering atoms? Just all those combinations, and understand there are issues with doing that are fine, but there are challenges sometimes bringing those different worlds together and users' expectations. And I think to a great degree, our expectations today might be a little higher for bits. I know I am so bad at UI UX. I mean, I was ranting and raving about the Alexa app on the phone is the I won't swear, but that worst UI I've seen like in ages. Venmo's AI, I loved it when it first came in. So just kind of think of those things. That's just how I think of the world. I'm weird.
Anyone has question? Last question for today. Okay. If not, oh, Allison? I don't hear anything. So if not, I will ask one final question for both Hanna and Deb. Okay, right, no. So one thing that you both have hinted upon is how there's this art and science of navigating the journey. Different signals you need to measure, different tests you need to triangulate, and the unique challenges that come with building the bits and the atoms. So if there is a couple questions founders can ask themselves daily or regularly to make sure they're on the right track, what would those questions be? How do you remind yourself, like being accountable and being intentional about the journey?
Hannah.
A question I ask myself almost daily is how close to the customer am I on that given week? We're a year and a half old, so I need to be as close to the customer as possible in order to keep checking in on product market fit, finding new threads of new niche audiences, all that stuff. And that is actually quite emotionally draining for my job, because that means I'm DMing with customers all the time on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm doing our customer service for emails and putting out surveys. And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of people interfacing in a way that can be emotionally exhausting. And so that's why I have to keep checking in with myself and asking, how close are you to the customer this week? Because I'm an introvert, and my natural, I'd like to go hide and not answer customer service emails all the time, but it is really rewarding and it is really important. So that's the question I ask myself all the time. That, and one thing that's been hammered into my head by all of my advisors is just like, how on top of your budget and financial plan are you? And you should be checking that on a weekly basis when you're at our stage.
I think there are two things you should always be asking yourself. One is it about me or the customer? There is a very small, dense, but important book by a guy named Martin Buber, B-U-B-E-R. He's dead, but it's good. Called I, Thou, T-H-O-U. It is dense but important. And keeping that mindset up, it's not about me. It's about the customer and their problem from their perspective in their world. And the second thing to keep challenging yourself is, I have this phrase, rush to discover, don't rush to solve. By nature, as humans, we rush to solve. Your job is to rush to discover as much as you can about the problem in your users and solve after you know that. And just keep telling yourself, it's not about you, it's about learning to understand as quickly and as best you can.
Any final words for the audience?
Try it, guys. Go for it. The worst thing you do is learn a heck of a lot that you can use again. And also, I think that Charlene's going to be giving out some kind of code if you want to get a copy of the book. But go for it, try it, and understand there are no perfect answers or solutions. It's a great area.
Yeah, and I just have a form. You just have to put in an email, and then we'll send you a complimentary copy of the Value Proposition book written by Daniel Scofield. It's awesome. It's amazing. And if anyone has questions in the future, there'll be opportunities. So stay tuned for more. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is great.